Hey traders, welcome to another week. We're looking at a potentially quiet start to the week with a US holiday on Monday and Chinese New Year starting on Tuesday. So potentially quite a mundane week ahead, but we'll be still keeping a close eye on some price action because there's some key charts at some key levels that we really need to be keeping a close eye on. One of them being the dollar, which is going to be a big focus of this week's breakdown. When we look at the dollar on the weekly chart, we can see how we're sitting right near those really key levels that we starting to look for that turn in the dollar. And we had that strong push off the lows early last week, early in January, excuse me. And now we're just trying to see what kind of price action we're looking at the moment. And this week is going to be a very key period to see what kind of price action we're looking for. Potentially what we're looking at is a push off these lows and possibly just a corrective structure that signifies that we're going to be heading higher from here. If we start to see this start to chop back up to the highs, that could really mean we're looking at a turn in the dollar narrative, and that's really going to be a big change in everything. If you guys have been following me a while, you know that I'm waiting for this turn in the dollar. That's really going to change the narrative of the markets and really lead to some nasty market price action. Which you can see a video in my feed called A Friendly Warning, something along those lines. Take a look at that video and you can see what we're looking for in the longer term. So this week is all about taking a note as where we're going to head here. Are we going to correct, or are we going to continue chopping back down to the lows and a continuation of that dollar weakness over the next kind of few weeks, maybe a few months before we see that turn? So again, we're around those key levels and we're all just looking for those signals to see if we've turned or not. Same with the euro. We're trying to see if we've topped out in the euro and we're heading down on the higher time frames. We are still at that key levels where we can see a move to the downside. You can see a complete corrective structure already, although there may still be a little bit more upside before we see the turn to the downside. So the turn is coming either way, in my view. It's just about, are we seeing the turn already, or do we have to wait? And we're going to see more price action that signifies more dollar weakness over the next few months. And again, this week is going to be really key to say if this topping out was the start of a bigger move down. Was this the top, or are we just correcting for further upside? So it's really make or break time for the dollar, and the next week or two is really going to signify that. So again, are we going to see this develop into something corrective? Are we going to chop back down to the lows? If we do over this week, then we can really start to see a change in narrative. If this just gets a little bit of a more smaller correction on the lower time frames, then we can start to look for some long dollar trades or some long euro trades, short dollar trades continuation. Then we'll see this continue to the upside. So early in the week, and probably for most of this week, we're going to see not much action on the dollar in terms of trades, but we'll be keeping a close eye on the dollar as to where we're headed in the longer term. Pound's another one. The pound is looking really weak at the moment. We look like we're really close to a big turn in the pound. The dollar has definitely done enough to reach a level where we're going to see a bigger turn. If we go out to, say, the daily charts, we can see what we're looking for is a big move, very much in line with this one to the downside. It could happen from these levels, but again, we could still chop back up towards 140 before we see the turn. But it's definitely right at that level where we could start to see a turn early in this week. So another chart that's very key that we'll be keeping a close eye on. But like I said, a lot of these pound pairs are looking really weak, so we'll be keeping a close eye on the pound this week for some key trades as well, especially in the cross pairs like the New Zealand dollar, pound Swiss, pound Oz. Aussie dollar, US dollar is one that's also not really giving us much in terms of an indication as to where we're sitting, where we can go next. We did get this little corrective price action, nice little zigzag if you want to look at it like that, and a nice push off those lows. But the size of the correction means the upside on this move is really limited and not really tradable in my view. The only way I can see this developing into something that's going to signify a lot more further upside would mean something really corrective in this region and fairly drawn out, and then another pop higher, and then we'd like to see another pop lower, meaning all of this would end up being corrective price action. And then we have a much bigger correction that we can say, okay, there is a lot more decent upside to come on the Aussie. When I look at the New Zealand dollar, it looks to me more like we've topped out already. When we look at the New Zealand dollar, we have a nice push off the highs. We go into a very complex corrective structure, which I'm thinking that we may see chop back down to the lows, give us one more push up to the highs, very choppy price action. And all of that is going to be one long drawn out complex correction, a complex flat. And then from there, we see downside. The only way that this is not the scenario is this, all of this is a triangle. And because we never pushed off these lows and got a lot of speed to the upside or a lot of momentum to the upside, we're really approaching an area where we may start to see the New Zealand dollar in trouble here. And again, the New Zealand dollar is looking pretty weak as well. So it's either this is going to be a top, meaning the Aussie, or meaning the US dollar has topped out, or we're just starting to see a really weak New Zealand dollar moving forward. So yeah, another one to keep a close eye on. Silver, I'm still pretty bearish silver. It looks to me like we are chopping back down towards these lows, so we're getting that choppiness that we were looking for. And from there, we're going to see continuation to the downside and potentially a strong top in the silver and a big move to the downside to come that we've been calling for. But nothing conclusive just yet. We need to see this continue to chop back down to the lows this week, and then we're going to have a much cleaner, much more significant viewpoint on silver. So for now, we're kind of just watching it from the sidelines, nothing tradable, and just kind of being patient with that. Whereas gold, I'm actually quite bearish gold. Gold's got quite a bearish picture to it. I'm already short, slightly on top in the trade, kind of struggling to decide how to manage it because we do have quite a clean structure, but we're missing some key components of the structure to really get good conviction. We're going to head down from here. There's a good chance we're going to go back up to these highs, get really close to the stop loss, and then push down from there. There's obviously the possibility that this gets a little bit more extended, maybe even takes us out, and then we see the turn to the downside. I still remain bearish gold. I still think that gold is turned. We just have to wait and see how it plays out because of the downside target on gold, which is around about, if I'm not mistaken, the 1200 region. I mean, this is a much longer term trade that I'm looking to hold on to here, down towards kind of 1250 on gold, which is a very, very big move, which means I'm probably just going to leave my stop where it is. If I get stopped out, so be it. I'll wait for that turn. The higher time frame to me is still bearish gold. It's just about getting the timing right and getting into the short at the right level. Platinum, as you guys know, I changed my view on platinum. I changed the structure into being something a little bit more complex. I'm actually going to go back to a cleaner picture because of the price action we've been seeing lately. So I'm going to go back to this as a central little short structure, a little short pattern, impulse down, ABC, impulse down. I think we're on the impulse up. This one to the upside now. As you can see, we are just touching on the minimum levels now. So we're right at that level where we could start to see a turn to the downside. But again, I remain bearish platinum. There's nothing to say we're at a level where it's looking time to enter longs. If you're in this long, that's good. You should be trading your stop, should be managing it. You've got a really nice little price action where you could be trading your stop up, 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 and now you're just moving your stop up to here. So really nice profit on our longs from platinum, still holding that long, but we're at that level where we could be looking for the short, the switch around to the downside. Platinum was really tricky trading. So if you did manage to stay on to that long trade, you've done really well. But as you can see, we're really at that level now where we could be looking for a topping out. We are at the levels on both time frames to start looking for a turnaround in platinum. Euro New Zealand, I'm really liking the long in Euro New Zealand. Again, being long Euro, short New Zealand, I think is a good call at the moment. We go into the structure. I'm going to give this one a fairly decent breakdown so you guys can see what we're looking at. We have a nice big impulse off the highs. We go into this long, drawn out, running flat. So the structure looks really good for a pop higher at some point. We're just waiting to see when is that pop going to come. And when you go into the lower time frames, you can see what we're looking at is a nice little descending wedge into these lows, nice MACD divergence all the way down. So things are looking really good for return off these lows. And when you go into the really lower time frames, you can see we've got a nice strong pop off the lows. We've gone into this little corrective structure. It's not an ideal corrective structure, but there's potential that what we're looking at here is a little running flat for continuation to the upside and the start of that higher time frame move up towards our full target in around about this 175 region. So I've got an entry order above these highs of this 1 hour structure, and I'm ready to see this pop to the upside. So again, I'm very bearish Euro New Zealand. I like the price structure on Euro New Zealand, and I do think we're going to get this nice move higher. I'm already short New Zealand dollar yen, so I'm kind of doubling up on that, but I'm happy to be in two positions in one pair just to take advantage of a structure that looks so clean and so ready to pop higher. Pound Oz is looking interesting just because in the higher time frames. When we go out to the higher time frames, we can see the structure looks really good for much bigger downside on the Pound Oz. So we have this move to come down towards at least to the lows at 154, probably as low as kind of 143-ish. So the higher time frame definitely signaling more downside. We go down to the daily, we can see the daily also signaling more downside, where we have a really nice impulse off the highs, and we go into this long, drawn-out, expanding triangle structure. So really nice corrective price action. We've been calling this really cleanly for some time. We got this little short taking the C wave down in December. We were waiting for that pop up towards this E wave, and now we're waiting for another leg down. And that leg down may be looking to start, especially with the way the Pound Oz is looking really weak. We've had a nice push off the highs. As you can see, nice MACD divergence into the highs, nice push down from there. The corrective structure on the hourly isn't great. So I'm not going to get too involved in this trade too soon. In this region, we have a nice impulse, but the corrective structure to me isn't great. I want to give this a little bit of time to develop, see what comes of it. And if we look at anything, maybe a triangle starting to develop here, it's way too early for us to start calling a triangle. We need to see more price action. But if we start to see something along those lines, I will be looking to get into this short to the downside. But for now, just waiting patiently on the downside, waiting for some setups that might look good. But the higher time frames looking really good. We're just waiting for the lower time frames to clear out. And if you're looking for a hedge to that trade, the Pound Swiss looks really good for continuation to the upside. We're still looking for this move to the upside. We've been calling this market really well off the lows. Besides the choppiness, it looks like it's starting to get going now. You can see we just came out of this this corrective structure. Looks like a triangle, very convoluted, but we're still getting good upside. In terms of trading this, I don't know if we want to trade this as a little flag and just keep a tight stop. That is a possibility. So entry order above the highs, stop below the lows, just a low risk position. We may just see this continue pretty strongly to the upside. And like I said, it's a nice hedge against these kind of Pound Oz, Pound US dollar, Pound New Zealand dollar shorts that we're looking at. So I'm interested in this trade. Pound New Zealand is another one that we could be looking for a little bit of upside. As you can see, it's got similar structure to the Euro New Zealand, where we're seeing a nice push off the highs, also a nice push as an A wave. We're looking at this as a nice ABC corrective structure. We had a really slow start off the lows, but those lows are managing to hold up. So we still have some room to go in this move to the upside. So there is a trade still here. It's not my favorite. It's not as good as Euro New Zealand, but it is a possibility. So as I said, you can see this nice little push, and we go into this corrective structure. It looks very much like a very clean expanding triangle. So what we were looking for, or what we will be looking for, is a little bit of a dip down towards kind of 1.9, maybe not even as low as 1.9, just something that gives us an indication that we've popped one side lower, and then we can start to look for that long trade entry or above the highs. That will be a really nice clean structure, even if we just trade it as a little 1 hour structure trade. That could be a nice little trade to the upside if we can get a decent entry. But even longer term, I still like that as a trade up towards this kind of 197 region. Like I said, I prefer the Euro New Zealand, but this is just good confirmation that we should get that Euro New Zealand pop to the upside. Aussie dollar CAD. When we zoom out, we can see very similar structure. Expanding triangles, again, these expanding triangles are all over the place, just showing you the uncertainty in the market lately. But very clean A, B, C, D, E available to us. We were looking for this little move down. We did get it, not as big as I would have liked, but definitely enough to say we've seen the move, and now we're looking for longs. And if we go into the lower time frames, you can see there's still good potential to get into this trade. There was a nice little flag earlier on. I didn't really like it because of the lack of depth in that wave, that E wave in the expanding triangle. So now I'm looking for potentially this to develop into something quite corrective. Maybe we get another pop up and get a little bit of a dip down, and that's going to be a nice little ABC running flat that we would be a really nice trade for us. And definitely something we'll be looking at towards the end of the week, maybe the week after. New Zealand dollar yen, like I said, I'm short, a little bit underwater, but I still like the trade. New Zealand dollar Swiss giving me some nice conviction on this trade, even though I am underwater. So I'm going to hold my position. I'm going to leave my stop where it is. Zoomed out to the dailies, we can see what we're looking at is a nice little structure. So a nice little impulse, push down, nice little choppy move up, expanding or little ascending triangle, ascending wedge into the highs, a break of that wedge, and now we should get a little bit of downside. Little short-term time frame trade, just a little 2-1. I kept this on lower risk, but it should still play out. If you're not in this trade already, then entry order below these lows is still a pretty good trade. You might not get to that 2-1 that we were looking for if you go below these lows, but the New Zealand Swiss might be a nice opportunity for you there. As you can see, New Zealand Swiss, another one that's got a nice impulse off the highs, even better than New Zealand dollar yen impulse. And we go into a nice corrective structure. Might pop a little bit higher, as you can see, a little bit of a flag, but we should get that downside to come still on New Zealand dollar yen. Again, we're still looking for a nice little move to the downside. So decent potential for this trade to the downside. Again, just a short little trade, little 2-1, but that should play out quite nicely as well. Moving on to crypto. Interesting to see Bitcoin giving us a little bit of a rising wedge. We're already really oversold on the weekly RSI on crypto, on Bitcoin especially. And what we're seeing is the structure is still there. I still have a bearish outlook for Bitcoin, at least in the medium term. I still think we need to see a deeper dip, but that's all going to be part of a dollar move more than anything to do with crypto or Bitcoin on its own. So it's all about seeing, are we seeing a topping out pattern in the structure? As you can see, we've come a really long way. We're seeing some MACD divergence on the daily. We're seeing a little bit of loss on momentum on the lower time frames. So there's nothing really here to say it's time to get short, but there are some signals, some signs to say it's really time to be careful. When we look at Ethereum, we're seeing the same thing, a much bigger rising wedge. And when we zoom out, we can see a much cleaner structure, and we're right at those levels where we really want to be cautious. So I know Bitcoin's been performing really well. I think it's just time to have some really tight stops on the trade, just in case things start to turn a little bit bearish, especially if we start to see the dollar move. We're seeing those 10-year yields really starting to accelerate. And if those yields continue to rise, we're going to see the dollar start to strengthen. And a strong dollar goes against the Bitcoin theory, the Bitcoin narrative of the dollar being printed into zero. So just be cautious of crypto this week. Keep your stops nice and tight, and we'll be looking closely to see what we see in these markets. And then finally, just Rio Tinto, really important equity on the Aussie exchange, which will be announcing earnings this week. And if you zoom out into the highest time frames, especially the monthlies, which tend to be a lot more accurate than the lower time frames, a lot more reliable, and we're really sitting at a level where we could see a turn to the downside. As you can see, we've got a nice push off the lows. All of this would be a B wave, and we've crossed the topping point or the highs of the structure. And we have a structure that says there's another big move down to come. So we've got a very clean ABC looking structure. We're going into earnings, very important earnings at a very important time in the economy. When you go into lower time frames, you're starting to see a little bit of a turn potentially in this market. So keeping a close eye on this. As you can see, earnings 17th of Feb, maybe a very, very vital earnings trade, and it's going to be a very key equity to watch this week. So keep a close eye on that. So cool, guys. As you can see, some really interesting trades. Might be a slow week. We'll be keeping a close eye on the dollar. But even then, outside of the dollar, there's some good trades. The EURNZD trade I really like. A couple of these New Zealand trades I really like. Keeping a close eye on the pound, heading into the later stages of the week. I like this Aussie dollar CAD to maybe give us a little long setup, and definitely be keeping a close eye on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and definitely keeping a close eye on precious metals. You guys know my bearish outlook at the moment. We're definitely at a point this week where we're going to get good signals as to whether that bearish market is going to start playing out as I suspect, or we're going to be in for a little bit of a delayed start to it and maybe even see more dollar weakness for the next few months before that thesis plays out. So patiently waiting. It's going to be an interesting week. Happy New Year for Chinese New Year, and enjoy your day off in the US markets. We'll see you in the trading room if you are a member for tomorrow's strategy session. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.